Issue 7 Living Proof Magazine, now available on our Patreon and online shop, featuring Jason Dill, Wanto246, Star Team East Village, Ed Templeton, Pear246, Rat Rats, GK Screw MSK, Cheryl Dunn, Strawberry Western, Labor Skateshop, Greetings Tour, Casey Bolding, and Brigade. Every copy comes with a Wanto poster. Patreon subscribers on the Living Proof Magazine tier are guaranteed a copy for the month of September 2024, even if the online shop is sold out. livingproofnewyork.com. Enjoy the episode. Peace and thank you. Thank you for doing this, dude.
Yeah.
For real.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And you're in like the mag, which is out by now. We haven't released it yet, but by the time this episode comes out, that mag should be out. And I'm super stoked to have been able to feature you guys in it and you in it and like talk about the whole labor story. But, you know, a lot of people aren't going to be able to, probably won't be able to read that shit. Like the digital shit just spreads way more. So I wanted to do this and like kind of go over the whole thing with your path with Labor Skate Shop and just like being a skateboarder, coming to New York, experiencing what it is to grow up in a skate shop, seeing the whole thing with Autumn, them going out, and just kind of like the thing that you were telling me about. So I guess like I can't remember exactly how we started the written portion, but when did the idea of making a skate shop come to your brain? Because it's been since 2012 is when you guys opened Labor, which at this point is like, seems like everything has changed so much within skateboarding, within New York, and within just everything in general. But yeah, when did the initial idea come to, I want to make a skate shop?
The very first idea, I would say, started way before the shop actually opened. So I would even put it back to like in 2003. Just coming here and like visiting was a couple of years before I lived here, and just taking a look at what was going on. And granted, at the time there were a lot of shops. You know, Autumn was here and they were doing a great job. KCDC was open, all that. But just in the back of my mind, it was always like, oh, this would be a cool idea to have a shop. However, again, as I kind of touched on in the previous interview, that just kind of where I'm from and where my mentality is with skate shops, you don't open one in someone else's backyard. So I wanted to have it in Manhattan. There already were shops in Manhattan, so I didn't want to step on anyone's toes. And I guess it really all came to a head. So that just kind of put everything to the side for quite a few years. And then fast forward to around 2011, it was when Autumn unfortunately announced that they were closing. And I actually believe it was a Facebook post. And it was really sad and unfortunate. But at the same time, then I figured this is kind of my opportunity to do something like along the same lines, but with my own kind of spin on it and my own approach and everything like that.
Yeah. So it was like a 9-year period of thinking about doing this thing before it actually happened.
Yeah, correct. But I should say that it was definitely something that got sort of put aside for quite a while, you know.
Yeah. What were you doing before opening Labor?
Man, I did every possible thing. So when I first moved here, I was like a temp. You know, I got like a temp job, just working whatever I could do, working in an office, making copies, doing that kind of stuff. Then I ended up working for a clothing shop that had a store in Tribeca and like on the Bowery. And then that kind of fell apart right around the time that the financial crisis, sort of global financial crisis happened. And for that was really tough for me. And I was unemployed for almost 2 years. And it was rough in the city at that time to find any type of work. So I was trying to find anything I could. My partner at the time, who was my girlfriend, who's now we're married, she still had a job. So she was able to kind of help like pay all the bills. And then I would like walk dogs and like ended up sort of like her coworkers. I'd make them like weed brownies and like and like sell them pans of weed brownies and just
You're
like
just hustling
anything at that time to try to just like basically cover costs and also to actually buy skateboards, which, you know, pay our bills and then buy skateboards. And I ended up spending a lot of time at the time. Autumn actually had a temporary space on Mulberry where they did a Quicksilver Autumn pop-up and they had a mini ramp inside. which later ended up at 12th and A. But they had this mini ramp and you could skate it for free. And I was unemployed and I would go and skate it every day. And I'm sure they just got sick of my face, but but it was fun and it was like free and it was something to do. And then eventually I was talking to a friend of mine that I had met through like skating and riding bikes, and his girlfriend worked at a restaurant, and I had never actually worked at a restaurant. And she was like, "Hey, we could get you a job." And this was like late 2009. So I had been unemployed for over a year. And I was just like, I'll do anything, whatever it takes. And I ended up having an interview with this like really eccentric manager who became one of my favorite people that I ever met in New York. He was like a lifelong West Village, born and raised, like third generation of living in the village, and just like a very interesting character, tons of stories. But they ended up hiring me, and I worked there basically until I opened the shop.
Okay, yeah. You talked about how fucking Autumn was closing, and that was like more of a green light to be able to even open a shop because you don't want to do it in someone's backyard. And I know you got a lot of respect for not just Autumn, but skate shops in general and anybody who's doing their thing in that realm. Um, why why did Autumn close? Do you
In
know the story?
insofar as I can tell, I think it just came down to like they had been open for 10 years, and I think like over the years it just became like, I think that from what I understand, just the East Village in general, like shopping wise at that time, had sort of like taken a little bit of turn. There, in that 10 years, there's sort of like a generational shift, which I think you kind of see with skateboarding in general, whether it's a brand or a store or whatever it is, there's always kind of a cycle. And I think from what I can tell, what happened is the last couple of years, I just think they had a lot of challenges. And from what I heard from a friend who was close with Dave, the owner, I think they just came to a point where the last few months, like back to school and holiday, were pretty brutal for them. Those last couple of years, I mean, those last couple of months, and I think it just didn't make sense anymore to have it be open. And I think a lot of and also from what I understand, again, this is like people that I know that like worked there, put in shifts there, and things like that. It was like I think it became a little bit of a challenge because everyone was kind of the homie. So then everyone would sort of expect, this happens with a lot of shops, like everyone expects a deal. Everyone expects that when you get the order, they can just pull what they want off the top and buy it at cost or buy it for a couple bucks over cost or whatever. And you understand like how that comes to be, but it also is really hard to then keep a shop open,
Yeah.
from what I understand.
Yeah, the generational shift. What do you think that causes? Like, do you think that just means like the skate scene in general, the kids who skate are just changing in their interest in what they like, or you mean like the industry and how much shit costs to buy and all that shit? Like, is that what you mean by the changes in the generation?
I think actually both of those, because I think you see it in everything, and it's just the way it is, and it's great because people grow and change. So on that point, kids change what they like. They're looking for different things. They're not as into the brand or the shop or even the same people, the crew. Everyone's kind of doing a different thing. And then also some people get a little bit, I've seen it before many times, where people get a little bit, I don't want to say jaded, but just kind of like frustrated with the fact that maybe the brand they thought they liked isn't what they thought they liked anymore. Or maybe they were trying to make a go at having a skate career and it didn't work out. And so some people still keep going and skating, and some people are just like, I'd rather do something else. And so that in terms of brands, and then also just, I do think there's something that we see where just people's preferences change, and different people are into different things. And even if you skate, like say the kid that maybe was 13 or 14 and skated every day and like spent everything they had to get a board and all that, 8 years 9 years later, they're 22 23 years old, and they're like, they may still like skating, but they're going to do it once a week instead of every day, a couple times a month with friends, if that. And so I think that shifts. And if there's not like an sort of an active attempt at reaching out to other people or whatever, or whatever the case may be, it's hard to have people interested in what you're doing, even though from the face of it, like when they closed, I remember people being super upset, and people were talking about keeping it going. And Jeremy grandpa was pretty actively looking for a space, but I don't think that it eventually just didn't make sense for him to move forward with it.
Yeah, so much respect to people who do that shit for that
Yeah,
long, for
yeah,
real, because like when I was coming up, in my naive brain, I just felt like every company that exists right now just has always existed and will continue to exist forever. Like the time when I was the most into skateboarding, um, and like the most like toy at it, which is like the one of the funnest times ever when you're still learning and like it's all just like a mysterious world. It was like Mystery, Circa, Emerica, Zero, Fallen, making a lot of noise, and they had their own aesthetic, and like each team had their own different aesthetic, but like for the most part, like that's what in my brain at least what skateboarding was. They put out a video. That video is like my bible now, and it's like the skate videos back then look different. Like they look so different than they do now in every single way possible. It's not just like what they're wearing or how their pants fit or what brands they're wearing, but also like the trick selection and what is being done. It's like pure handrail mania, big set. Every trick is like as like could be an ender pretty much. The VX and how that shit looks, and the ramped slow mo with like everyone freaking out when they land. Like all that shit is, I'm not gonna say gone, but it's not the same as what skateboarding is today. Skateboarding today is like it's a whole it's the same, but it's very different. You know what I mean? The videos are different. The trick selection is different. What kids think is cool is different. And so all these brands that I thought impossible to not be the most poppin' shit, now it's like it's not even like to be the most poppin' shit, they would have to completely change what that thing was. You know what I mean? Which how can they fucking do that and be legit to themselves? Like they kind of can't, I feel like. So seeing companies that can last over time, that shit's crazy, and only so many, like only a few can do it. They somehow have that like style. Like Antihero is a fucking perfect
Yep.
example in my
Yep.
brain. Like how are they going they're going to skate balls, they're going to skate transition, they're going to skate it their way, and their videos aside from like the cameras that they use have kind of just been the same, like in a very good way. Like they stick to what they do, they're really good at what they do, and they don't have too many like tricks, you know what I mean? They just have like the essence of what it is they do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good example because there aren't very many like that. And even brands that are sort of somewhat parallel, let's say Girl, they've had dark times as well. So it's an Antihero has interestingly, I mean, I'm quite old, and I can actually say that from the first time, like when I started skating, to now, I would have ridden an Antihero and have ridden an Antihero the whole time. The first time I got one was 1995. It's 2024. I would still pick one off the wall immediately if I had to. That's
It's
pretty
crazy.
rare.
It's crazy.
It's pretty rare.
The first time I saw their logo being like a complete toy within skateboarding, I already could just tell that that was the shit. Like no one had to explain it to me. I didn't know who rode for their team. I didn't even know what maybe the difference between like tech ledge skating or transition was. But I saw their logo, someone skating it, and I'm like, dude, for some reason I know that that's like the highest level right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to what we were talking about. So Autumn closed because of that. You think that's just a problem that we were talking about, like the 10-year cycle that happens within brands? You think that happens within skate shops? Do you think that's just a thing inherent to skate shops? And you as running labor, is that in your brain? Is that on your mind? Like, damn, like will there ever come a point where I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you have to be pretty proactive. And I mean, to be quite blunt, I've seen it on our end. Of course, it's like we've had all sorts of different like crews and generations in the 12 years we've been open come through. We still see a lot of the same people, and some people we don't see anymore. That's the way it goes. But the what I've been really adamant about is trying to create a situation that we have like we have what we have. So
All good.
we have what we have, and we present the shop the way we do. We have brands and we choose them. We don't carry every single thing on earth, and we don't carry a million, like I purposefully don't carry like super low quality trucks and like bargain completes and stuff just because I don't believe in that. But at the same time, we are really welcoming to like a beginner or someone like that, because my idea is like we're not going to survive if we're not. I understand, like I came up going to like some of the first experiences in my life of going to stores was like there was this is probably early 90s. There was a punk rock record store next to a skate shop. They were both equally scary. You'd go in the punk rock record shop, the guy's smoking cigs. There's all these crazy records. You don't know what anything is.
Yeah.
He's super hungover. He doesn't want to talk to you, but eventually you keep coming in, and you grow on him because you're a kid and you're annoying, but like you're still coming in. Kind of same thing with the skate shop. It's a little different thing now though. And I'm not, a lot of people kind of are, oh, this and that, and they get nostalgic for all that. That's fine. And I get it. And like, yeah, if you can run a shop and have the same kind of like bite and stuff and all that, like I get all that. I'm not saying like, oh, we're coming in, but I believe that in the different era, like back then too, rent for some of those places was probably $500 a month. It's not like that anymore. It's 10 times or more of that. So I think that the way that, in my opinion, to do is like you create what you want there, but you also are helpful enough to people. And that's been my attempt to try to keep going. So it's not like, yeah, like I love all the people that have come through and the people that still come through 12 years later. I've seen kids grow up, all that stuff. It's amazing. But I also recognize that people that maybe came in years ago, we don't see them anymore for whatever reason. And I think that's great because that's growth. That's progress. And everyone has to grow and progress in whatever way they want. And I don't personally hold anything against anyone, but to me, to keep it going, you have to reach out to new people. And whether that's like kids starting to skate, which we try to do, like, as much like talking to kids, seeing what they're up to, all that, keep them hyped on it. Because that kind of ties back into what I think a long way of what you're saying about like with videos changing and all that is like so many other things with skateboarding have changed with, I think even like also I think kids sticking with it is much different than it used to be. Because
what
like,
do you mean?
Well, we used to see, like take for example, like when we first opened, the crews we would see that were young, we'd see them for a couple years. And then usually a couple of those kids would stick with it. Few would find other things, whatever. Now I really think, and I'm not like mad about this, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Now it's more like a cycle of months. We had this kid that was hanging out at the shop every day, like practicing kick flips, heel flips, obsessed with heel flips every day, practicing in the street. He lived in the neighborhood. This is the LES store. A couple months later, we stopped seeing him. A couple months after that, he comes back in. It's winter. He's like, oh, I quit skating. Maybe I'll start up again in spring. See him a couple months after that. We see him, well, what's up? How have you been? Like, oh, I quit skating. It's just, I don't know. I'm doing other stuff. I'm doing this and that. And we've seen that a lot. I just think it's a different sort of cycle now of it's a little more rapid, because I do think skating is quite hard. And for some people, they like that challenge and they stick with it because it motivates them and stimulates their brains. And then other people are just like, I don't like this. I'd rather do something else. And I think it happens a little bit quicker now.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way it is.
I wonder why that is. Do you think that's just like a sign of the times? Do you think it's like, because I've always thought that if you're like a real skateboarder, once you're into something, once you're into this forever and ever. I would just see the videos of even dudes who are like not like old, but like older compared to myself and my generation, and like they're still killing it in street videos. They're still killing it, even jumping downstairs, and like maybe their style changes as time goes on, but like their interest in skateboarding is a constant, to the point where like in my personal life, when I got into or even noticed that I liked anything else that wasn't skating, I'm like, whoa, do I actually like this? I need to fucking chill, dude. I need to like chill with liking this other thing, because I already got my thing. And I think that was the mentality that all my friends had as well, because that was just like the skateboarder mentality. It's not like, as cliche and corny as it is to say, it's not like a hobby. It's more like a thing that you do forever, like a quote unquote lifestyle. It's like a way of thinking and just like a way of being. So how the fuck are you just gonna hop in and hop out? That doesn't even make any sense. But if you're saying that the cycles are going faster and faster, that's news to me. Obviously, I don't work at a skate shop.
Yeah. No, I definitely see what you're saying and fully understand that, and I see that as well, because we do see some of the same people that used to be around still skating, of course. But yeah, I do think, and I can't pinpoint exactly why, but somebody said to me not that long ago about this whole topic, and I think this is somewhat true, that I think I think overall, like in a sort of broad stroke way, it does seem like skateboarding is getting, skateboarding, let's say on the East Coast specifically, like skateboarding in New York City, even more specifically, it might be getting a little more in line with, say, what it is in, say, Southern California, where everyone owns a skateboard pretty much. Everyone's like math teacher can do a kickflip, but it's not their life.
Yeah.
They do million other things, whether it's they're doing other stuff. And I think to some extent now, what I see is that there's a lot of kids that maybe skate a little bit, but it's not as much of their life as it is just another thing they do, another part of them. I don't necessarily think that's bad. It's just an observation. It's just different.
Yeah.
Because people now, whether it's like a lot of skateboarders I see get into music, a lot of skateboarders I see get into like graffiti or other like different aspects of art, or whether it's DJing or like trying to throw parties or whatever that is. And that's always been the case, of course, but I think it's more multifaceted now. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. It just, as a skate shop person, it's just, we like to see people again and again. It's nice to see people like progressing and loving skateboarding. And I'm not saying that anyone loves skateboarding less. It just doesn't seem like it's as much of a focus, like as you were saying, or certainly when I grew up as well.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I see fools skating down the street with longboards who 100% don't skateboard, and they're just using it as a form of transportation. And they are actively pushing, and some of them pushing, like, I'm not going to say with style, but like, they're not, it's not their, it looks like they could maybe even do a front slash or some shit. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, this dude's gonna like, how is this dude even doing this? Like, when I know he doesn't skate, dude, like, why would you choose this thing as your mode of transportation? It's actually a pretty shitty mode of transportation.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was first starting, having it was like a struggle to like push like that. And I'm like, this dude who never fucking skated before can just do that. And like, why isn't he hitting a stop rock and flying? Like, why aren't all of these things happening? I'm like, and there's a lot of them. They're just like regular people who have the ability to push Mach 10 down the street to get to their places. And I'm like, that speaks to the more mainstream aspect of skateboarding. And like, like fucking kids used to try to clown me for even wearing Vans. And I'm like, nowadays that's unseen, unheard of. Like, Vans are fucking cool to wear, dude. And I'm sure, like, sure as hell, kids in high school wear Vans who don't skate. Anyways, a side tangent, but yeah, no. With the things changing and like you running, Labor Skate Shop, and a whole nother aspect of it is that Labor Skate Shop does not sell like snowboards, does not sell like BMX. Whereas skate shops in other places, they do that even if they're run by like straight up real deal skateboarders, and that's because just other ways of making a living, which I completely understand. Because you got to keep the doors open, you got to put bread on the table, you got to fucking do what you have to do, but you guys don't do that. And kind of falling in line with what your idea of a skate shop is. But how is it with the changing of the industry from your perspective of running the shop?
Are you talking about currently?
Yeah. And just not even just currently, but since 2012 to 2024, it's a fucking long time.
Yeah. I mean, things have changed a lot, and I think things have changed even more rapidly and more drastically in the last, say, 4 years or so. But yeah, I mean, the industry has changed a lot. I think one of the big things is we keep hearing about like participation levels are up and everyone's skateboarding and all this stuff, but a lot of shops sort of on our level, similar across the whole country, aren't really seeing that, because I do think that the industry is changing. I do think there's a ton of companies out there. Unfortunately, some are going out of business, like Alzheimer's. We just heard about that. Like heartbreaking to hear that. Just a punch in the gut. And I think, unfortunately, we may see more of that, because I think that the industry has kind of gotten a little bit inflated, where there's just almost too many companies. And again, like, that's not to say anyone shouldn't start something if they have an idea for something new. It's just kind of the reality of it is we seem like there's a really big amount of companies and a lot of people to skate for them, but there's not a lot of less necessarily like on the ground business, So that's been really tough. And then the shoe business too, not to, you know, necessarily bore you with all these sort of industry details, but really what's happened in the shoe market that's kind of trickled down to shops is that we just are having a hard time selling everything, which, I mean, it's all in the news. You read about all the bigger shoe brands that we all carry, or, you know, a lot of them are have a lot of stock in the a lot of um, stock of the product in the market, and so there's a lot of stuff available, and so customers can buy stuff on sale and all that stuff. So then for a shop, that makes it a little more challenging when you're small and you're relying on selling stuff hopefully at regular price to just, you know, turn it over and make all your bills and do that. um you know, but I think like potentially the silver lining is like when this shakes out is that we're going to have something that I have to believe and hope that's a bit stronger, and the people that are really into skateboarding and have been part of it and have hung on are going to be, you know, it's going to be even better. And I think it's really good now. I mean, look at a perfect example of like kind of getting motivated on stuff is, I don't know if you've had a chance to see that new Nike
I
video,
did
but
see it.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's mind blowing. And
Yeah.
so many people,
So many people.
but so many people from here, and like skaters that live here. And I mean, that got me really excited, and I was really optimistic to see like, oh, there's a really, you know, strong sort of push, and to see all these people kind of pushing skateboarding in a really great direction.
Yeah, it's cool they got Johnny Wilson to
Yeah.
film the video too, because it's like a Johnny Wilson
Yep.
video.
Yeah. That to me, it was the most exciting, is when I when the video started and I saw it, I'm like, this looks like a Johnny video, and I'm like, oh, it is a Johnny video, and Antonio, and that the whole thing, man. Kareem was one of my favorite parts as well. But man, yeah, so that stuff like that, little sidetrack, but stuff like that does get me kind of thinking positively, because I don't want to paint this picture as like everything is bad. But it is a little tricky right now, and I think that's part of it. And, you know, it's just something that I think we have to work through and kind of look forward and look ahead, and try to be, but also try to be kind of careful as we move forward, and not get too ahead of ourselves, you know.
Yeah, the shoe industry, the footwear industry within skateboarding is something that really interests me as well. Like, um, you got like skate shops maybe in like 2009 or something like that, and it'd be like, I think like I don't even remember if my local shop carried Converse. Um, I think they had a few Nikes, and it wasn't really what people were going for.
Mm-hmm.
I remember they had yeah, they just had a few Nikes, and I don't really think that, like, at least within my friend group, that wasn't what we really went for. Maybe later on, like homies after like the Janaski came out, homies started skating like Blazers more, and they caught my eye, and I'm like, yo, Blazers look pretty fucking sick, dude. Like the low top, the high tops or mid or whatever, like those are pretty sick. But that's like the extent of it that I'd see. Um, I'd see like, you know, iPath, Circa, and all those a lot of like skater owned and operated companies. Um, and now like you see New Balance, you see Asics, and you see people realizing, like, these big companies realizing the opportunities, I guess, within skateboarding, and thus investing in it. And it's like now it's more popular to see Converse, to see Nike, to see the, which is a good thing because they bring a lot of opportunity into skateboarding. More so, like, not even just for the community and the kids who skate, but also the riders. Like, I think that you know, shoe deals with as a skateboarder is probably where the bread is at, and how you actually sustain yourself, because you see a lot of pro skateboarders and like they get fucked, like financially they get fucked, and it makes sense, you know. um Now with like Nike, Converse, New Balance, Asics, and whoever the fuck else is going to come in, um they have more of an ability to take care of themselves, which is dope. You stocking these brands at Labor, how has that been? How has it been dealing with, because I have no fucking clue how do you contact Nike, then how do you decide what shoes you're gonna get and what shoes you aren't, how many sizes of what, and this whole thing. Because another aspect of it is that, um, when a pair of shoes used to come out, like perfect example is like the Reynolds 3. I remember when the Reynolds 3 came out, or the Reynolds Cruiser, It was like a big fucking deal with America. And I had skated Vans for like maybe like 10 years straight. Like only Vans. I had this like absolute nonsensical like I'm going to only skate Vans. Like I'm not skating any other shoe even if I think they look good. But then the America's fucking Reynolds Cruisers came out and I'm like, "All right, fuck it, I'm skating these." And never once in my brain was I like, I'm going to get these from online, any source of online. Not just on some like let's support skateboarding shops, but also just because of how fucking inconvenient it would be. I'm gonna have to not try them on. I'm gonna have to wait like over one whole week at least for these to come in. It's gonna be a whole thing. Whereas I'm 100% gonna get them from the shop. It's the most convenient. I'm gonna be the first one there. I'm gonna get them in my size, and then I'm gonna be able to try them on. And then this is like everything about this is good versus the online, it's going to be a fucking drag. I'm going to have to wait. I don't get to try them on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's probably the opposite. Like you're saying, I could get those shoes delivered to my house in a day,
Mm.
and the rest is like, whatever. So how has that been with just carrying shoes at the shop and deciding all that stuff?
It's definitely a challenge in the beginning, especially in the beginning, to figure out. I mean, to answer the question, how do you get in touch with people? It's definitely a dance, because in the beginning you have to get the contacts and you have to hit people up, and usually you have to hit people up multiple times, and usually you get told no because there's someone too close or they've been around for too long so they can't open your account, and you have to understand that because you're like, hey, I'm the new guy, whatever, new person. But eventually when you do get all of those accounts straightened away, it's definitely a daunting task, and it is challenging to figure out, because you don't want to order too much, because if you do, then you're stuck with them. You don't want to order too little, because you also don't want to be the place that everyone's like, oh, I don't go there because they never have my size. So that's sort of a, its own little dance. But you know, over time it definitely helps, because it helps to kind of offset the money that you don't make selling skateboard hard goods, because even as the prices have gone up and all that, like the margin, the amount of profit you make on hard goods is very, very low. It always has been. It remains pretty low. So you kind of need the shoes, which are a cleaner margin, still not as high as, say, like fashion margins. Like if you go, like whether it's a boutique or somebody's own like store in Soho, like they're making huge margins on that stuff. Even like a department store that sells multi brands, if it's fashion, there's a different margin associated with that. So it's not as high as that, but it is a little bit better for a shop to make a little bit extra. And then you throw into the mix your own brand, like your own t-shirts, hats, pants, whatever it is, and you kind of juggle all that together, and it's a little bit easier to make it. But the footwear stuff is definitely a challenge, but it has been very, very good and very helpful for us to like keep the doors open, particularly when it's a little cold and you have a shoe that people want and all that stuff. It helps a lot. And yeah, I agree to your point. Like with supporting skateboarding, it really has been a thing where it has allowed people to have a career, even if it's only a couple of years, have something, because that's been a challenge for a lot of people, is like board brands, as the skate industry has grown and it's sort of gotten decentralized. That's great, but on the other side of that is that means that there's more people, there's the pie is getting chopped up more ways. So whereas, let's just say for the sake of it, there was 5 companies, of course there was way more than that. Now let's say there's 50. So it's still kind of the same, roughly the same amount of cash. It's just divvied up in different ways. So, and there's more skaters, right? So you have like all that. So the board brands can't pay skaters too much these days, except for a few. And then it's really the shoe brands and some clothing brands that are able to supply the riders with living wages or travel budget or whatever the case is, to kind of live and survive and skateboard without having to do like 15 other things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fucking crazy. Um, that whole I guess shift in the nature of the thing that is the skate industry. Because I listen to old podcasts with like fucking I don't know Steve Caballero or like Tony Hawk or some shit talking about being a skateboarder and being younger and skating in contests and getting monthly checks for boards being sold. And you gotta know that back then there was way less skateboarders. There just has to have been like vert contest days and like cement pool contest days, there's gotta have been like so many less. And yet at their age, for the money they were making, they felt like it was like they felt like probably they were rich. And now there's way more, but it's like granted there's ways to make it, but then you have to like finesse your way to get on certain teams and get on certain sponsors and get on that whole thing. Which is definitely crazy. Another thing too is that the prices of boards have gone up, and you kind of explained it to me, but um, it was something like with the manufacturer, something in like Mexico. What was it again?
So the one of the things that happened, and there's a lot of different layers to this, but one of the big things that happened, and this was about, let's say, 3 years ago, I believe, like may not have the exact, but right around 3 years ago, we'll say. So I would estimate, and obviously the industry is much bigger than what a shop like mine carries, right? But I would estimate that 80 to 85% of the boards on my wall come from one place, meaning one manufacturer. Now, I would also say that 95% of the boards, 98% of the boards come from Mexico. So there's a couple manufacturers in Mexico. Most of them are in Tijuana. And what happened about 3 years ago is the minimum wage in Tijuana tripled in a matter of, I want to say, 4 to 6 weeks. So what that did is it created this ripple effect of then prices had to go up pretty dramatically and pretty quickly. And so you had a situation where prices were going up a couple dollars here, a couple dollars there for all the different reasons of like wood coming from Canada, which is where most of the raw maple comes from. It comes from Canada or northern Midwest states. It's a specific kind of maple. It's hard rock maple. It has to be grown in a cold climate for it to give the properties that we like in a skateboard, feel the snap and all that. And so that stuff, getting it there, especially during pandemic, was tricky, and all the costs, and then shipping costs go up, fuel costs, all those things wrap into it. But then you throw it into the mix that the manufacturing costs just went through the roof. So you had a situation where not that much not that far in the past, the boards, like let's say we were selling a board retail for $55, maybe 57 if it was a higher end one. You had a situation where in a matter of like 18 months, 2 years, you had it flipped to where that was pretty much what wholesale was close to what retail was a year earlier. And where do you go with that?
That's fucking wild, dude.
Yeah. So you can't,
it's mad destabilizing.
Yeah. And you can't go, all right, 55, now it's 110. Like you can't do that. So you have to figure out ways to go incrementally. And there's exceptions to all these things, but it was just a tricky scenario where then we had to start charging more. And I think now the average board from most of the brands is about $70. Some are 75, some are 80, some are more than that. Some companies are doing like hand screened and limited editions. Those are a bit more as well, because there's more going into those, and it's a lot more labor intensive because there's basically two ways to make apply a skateboard graphic. One, the old style, is a silk screen, where the screen has to be actually loose, and so you can bend it over the concave of the board so it doesn't peel up and create bubbles. And that's the old method, and it's very expensive, very labor intensive. And the thing that most people do now, it's called the heat transfer, which is basically just a giant sticker, you could say, of a sort, and then you put it on top of the deck and put it on under some heat, and it adheres to the deck quickly, and it gives you like the look that we have now. But yeah, those are the two types. But yeah, I got a little sidetracked there. But yeah, so board prices have gone up, and then wheels, trucks, everything else has gone up too. Bearings kind of remain the same, but everything else has gone up quite a bit. So it's been a pretty drastic change in the last definitely 4 years, but more so even like 2.
Do you see them ever going back down to 50 for a board?
I don't think it's possible, because even so, I would say that and again, this is just an observation. I don't know. This is just my like looking ahead at what's going on in the industry, but I would say that I have to believe that more and more brands are probably going to make boards in China, because they'll be able to keep it closer to what it is even now for longer. So that's to say,
Because if anything, it's gonna go up.
I believe so. Yeah.
Hmm.
I can't see in the next 5 years that boards wouldn't get closer to $100 if they're made the same way they're making them now in the same place they're making them now, which just doesn't seem sustainable. And we're seeing even on our end, like I see people, for example, like a lot of, let's say, a mid-30s skater, they have a job, they do all sorts of things, but they skate quite a bit. Skate on the weekend, they're more like kind of weekend warrior style, but they skate a lot, right? But those types of customers, not all of them, but many of them are just sort of like $80 used to be 55. I'm going to get one every 3 to 4 months now and really make it last. Whereas when they were 55, they'd get one every 2 weeks.
Are drop offs still as much of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, we like,
Because they might be less of a thing now if kids are trying to hold on. People are trying to hold on to their boards for longer.
yeah, but you'd be surprised. There's still people that there's still people that are like they ride something a little bit. There's all the outliers, and we get a lot of people, and so we have like at both the stores, like we have them, and people ask, and I have to say it's gotten like people are sort of less picky about sizes of what, because it used to be the thing. It kind of always drove me a little crazy as it would after 10 years of hearing it, but
Like
people
it's a
ask,
free it's a free
yeah,
board and you
yeah,
want it like 8.5, not 8.25.
and like a specific brand or
Yeah.
something. And I'm like, man, I'm like, look, this is what we got. This is what we got.
Yeah.
Happy to give it to you.
Yeah.
Also happy to not have a conversation about what size you really want. But it's also all good. Like kids are kids, and it's great. But it's yeah, I mean, I would say we don't get as many like good drop offs, but if your tail is broken off, here's something to roll on.
Yeah. Wow, so they're gonna have to do what they're gonna have to do to make that shit stay at 75-ish for longer, but then probably it'll just go up.
I think so. And it's it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I don't know if there's any other way. I mean, we don't need to go into it now because it'd be like it'll probably lose a lot of people. But I have like theories about how you could maybe do something domestically. I think there are parts of the country that it maybe could benefit from some local manufacturing, and it's kind of an easy item to manufacture. It's pretty light. I mean, light meaning it's not super. There are some glues, but it's not extremely toxic. It's not extremely, it's not super, super dirty energy or anything, so there are things, but again, will that happen? It's probably not, because
You're gonna need to do a lot of effort to make that shit happen.
yeah, somebody that did it would really have to put a lot into it. And I don't know that if there's anyone right now that's willing to do that. Cause I think, like I said, China.
Could you actually make them in China?
Yeah.
Seeing as like the cold climate and the type of, you said pine,
it's maple.
the type of maple that you need, could you actually make it there?
Well, there's several manufacturers that make them in China, and believe it or not, they, for the most part, are shipping the wood from Canada to China and back, and it's still way cheaper because of the labor, and because the shipping gets subsidized. I mean, the barges get subsidized on the way to China and back because the government sees it as an advantage for them to subsidize those costs, and that's a huge cost, obviously, so that when they wrap into that the cost of manufacturing the board and the labor costs and all that, it's still a better deal. And honestly, the boards are pretty good now. They didn't used to be, but then that just brings a whole other level of discussion about labor and all those other things associated with that.
Yeah. Why did, this is like, you might not even know, but I'm just curious myself. Why did the minimum wage go up in Tijuana? Did something like happen?
I actually don't know the specifics, so I don't want to give you an incorrect.
Yeah. Dude, it's fucking crazy how like one thing like that can cause a massive butterfly or domino effect that trickles down to like a kid who lives in South Brooklyn riding a fucked up board for way longer, which who fucking knows what the situation in the places where they're manufacturing for the crazy low is. Like their lives are probably affected tremendously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy shit. So we got really kind of off topic, but it's all good because this is all super interesting shit. But one of the things that I was really into finding out more this time around is like, so you wanted to do the shop, you decided to do the shop. How'd you find the location that you have? One and two, how did you learn how to do all that it probably entails to run a shop in Lower Manhattan? Like, of all the places in the world where you could do it at, Lower Manhattan probably seems to me just like right away seems to be like one of the more complicated places to do it, but also probably one of the more poppin' places to do it. You got LES right there. You got a thriving skate scene. You got people visiting all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, how was that finding the location and then like learning how to operate a shop successfully?
Yeah, I mean, all of that was like a very intense learning curve for sure. First off, finding the location was a pretty good. It was actually just sort of a sort of a little luck thing. I did look at a bunch of other places, kind of in the East Village, um, so Second Street, a couple places actually by the original Autumn, which was I believe on Second before it was on Ninth. I think it was maybe it was Third, but it was around there. Looked at a few other places, just didn't get the best vibe, and the price was a little high. And then finding the location that I'm in now, basically, long story short, Steve Rodriguez, I had talked to him through a friend, and I was telling him that I was interested in opening a shop, and he goes, "Oh, I have a friend who is looking to rent this space out. It might only be for a couple years. It was sort of up in the air whether it was going to be a long-term situation." So long story short, I got in touch with the guy. Um, we negotiated the deal for the original lease and all that, and then we opened. It was quite a few months and back and forth and all that, but I started going through all the process of like setting up the business structure, figuring out what it would entail, what sort of like you know licenses and permits and all that stuff that you need to do business in New York, specifically in Manhattan, and all of those little bits and pieces. You need commercial insurance, you need all of these little things that very quickly you jump into this situation that you have to like learn a lot on the fly, and you have to do everything legit, because you better believe, even if you're off tucked away in a corner of Manhattan, like someone's going to come check up on you, like for sure. Someone's walking through that door, and they're going to make sure you have all your stuff in order. You got your fire extinguishers, all that stuff. So
Like just random licenses
yeah, and
and
for
permits and shit.
yeah, exactly. And for retail, there aren't actually that many compared to say a restaurant or coffee shop, but there's a lot of stuff you gotta deal with and wade through all the nonsense of all that. So, but yeah, that was a big learning curve. And then just sort of like, I had I had worked at a skate shop where I did some like buying and ordering and things like that. And so my old boss, who, I don't know if you remember the vert skater Paul Zitzer. He was like a vert skater, and he was in like the early static videos and stuff. So his brother Mark Zitzer was my boss at the skate shop that I worked at when I was like 19, 20. And he was really instrumental in kind of like, they had a shop that had 3 locations, and it was like a big shop, just same kind of like skateboarding, all that, and kind of showed me the ropes, and let me do a little bit of buying and ordering and entering the product into the system. And it was basic, and I was young, but it definitely stuck with me. And I'm definitely a little bit of, I get, when I'm trying to accomplish a task, I get pretty hyper focused. And so when I was opening Labor, I just was like on the phone with Mark all the time, like bugging the shit out of him, picking his brain, like, what, how do I do this? How do I do that? And then also just learning that, kind of, especially when you start a skate shops or any business, really like that retail business, kind of start out you take it pretty easy, because you're getting excited about everything you're about to open. But when you turn that key, no, and even if people, like a few people know about you, like not everyone knows you're there. So you're not going to have a line of people as soon as you turn the key. Even if all your friends come in and buy a shirt and whatever, the week after that, you're just going to be sitting there like, you know. So that was a whole like learning process in and of itself. So, you kind of set up, you get those first orders in, you stock it, you set it up the way you want and all that. And then at the time, actually Instagram was a lot different than what it is now. And so we kind of used that to kind of like let people know where we were, and kind of just open up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fucking dope location, man.
Thanks.
I've always thought that it was one of the most pristine locations just because it's like right in the center of a bunch of things. It's like near Tompkins, but it's still near LES, and it's still near like everything right near the F train. And now, especially, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you ask, but with Dime Square popping off, like when you opened up, where you opened up, that was no Dime Square. I've never even heard of that term until relatively like recently, like the past few years or something. When I first heard of that, I'm like, what do you like? What is that? And now, when you if I skate by there, bike by there, whatever, it's fucking a whole like ecosystem, and like a closed off street and
Hmm.
shit. It's like seemingly one of the places to be at, and you guys happen to be right there. How has that changed shit?
It it has changed it both, I would say, for good and bad. And I don't want to dwell on the bad because there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. It's just it is what it is. The only thing I would say that's, I guess, in my opinion, bad, and I fully understand it, is there are a lot of people that we don't see anymore because they're just like, oh, that area sucks, it's over, like it fucking hate it and whatever. And like, listen, I get it, I'm there most days, so especially after dark, it, when all, because the bar, there's so many bars and restaurants and things, and it's so different. And yeah, when we came, when we opened, it was like there was actually Bacaro, which is Alon, who had the book with
Yeah.
FA. His restaurant is right behind us. They had been there, I want to say, since '08. So they were there for a little bit. And then there was a couple other little, like Forget Me Not, the restaurant behind us, opened up around the time we did. But there wasn't much else there. There were a couple corner stores, couple Dimes wasn't there quite yet. Um, and yeah, I really liked the location because when I first saw the space before we even like signed a lease or had any agreement at all with like to be there, I sat there for a few hours and just kind of checked out what was going on. And it just looked like a nice area. Like there looked like there was people that might come in and just enough activity, but not too much. And it was just like really the place I really wanted to be. And yeah, it did change really rapidly, but I would say it really changed. It really started to exponentially change around, I would say, maybe 2021 ish is when it was like through the
What
roof.
caused that?
I think the success of a few area restaurants and like some places that were a bit cooler, that people thought were like cool places to be in that area, just that stuff sort of like compounds, on itself. And, there was like, I don't know, I don't remember the exact year that he opened, but Scar opened Scars, and that was a great addition to have something, some pizza and good pizza in the area. And then, some other, and then Dimes relocated to across the street from us because
Hmm.
originally they were on the corner. There was like a little bus stop, like right where Division and Canal meet, where there's like the dollar beer spot, or well, there was the dollar beer spot. That was right where the original Dimes was, and then they moved across the street from us. But yeah, it started to kind of, it was sort of incremental, I would say, until 2020. And then I think, and then a little bit after 2020, also the hotel opening, I think, was a big catalyst for that whole shift. And what is interesting is when we got the space, they were telling us, oh, the hotel is going to open in 2013. And I'm just like, I don't believe that, whatever. And that was, it really didn't open until, I don't remember the exact year now, but it hasn't been that long
Yeah.
since it's been open. And they're like, oh, and a lot of landlords were gaming that as a potential thing to jack up the rents too. So you had people getting kind of like, people that had been there for a little while getting like kind of like, oh, like this place is going to get kicked out or whatever because of that. But I do think that the hotel there did add to the desire for a restaurant or bar to be there.
Mm. So it was just a ton of things
Yeah, yeah,
leading to that shit.
yeah.
And then you expanded the shop relatively recently as well. How'd that come about? And it was like the shop closed, and then you were able to, like, I guess, tear down that wall or something. So yeah, how'd that go?
Well, the last year, the bike shop, Da Shop, like a BMX shop, super sick, like roots bike shop. So the owner Tyrone had been there, I want to say, since 2007, so quite a while. And I don't know the particulars, but I know that they were kind of done, and they were moving out, and our landlord gave us the opportunity to take the space because they're connected. And so they sort of, I think the idea was that they didn't want it, they didn't want any food in there, which like worked to our advantage because obviously with a bar or restaurant space, they can get way more money than a retail space, you know, but there's like different elements that are involved in that. You have to vent it and do all these different things. So the owners didn't want to do any of that. And so we were able to get that space, combine the two spaces and make it a lot bigger and more comfortable. I mean, bigger is relative, of course, but more comfortable for people coming in that sit down and get a pair of shoes or like, you know, talk to someone and not be bumped into by a million people
Yeah.
and all this stuff that, you know, in some people's eyes, like when we first did it, it was kind of funny because people would come in and be like, yeah, cool, but yeah, I like the old one better. And it's like, yeah, I get it.
I
I
feel like
mean,
people are always going to say
I
that
know.
for everything. Like, you always like the old Instagram version better than the new one, but then it's like you just do that shit forever with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get all that because, you know, there's some things I say that about too, I guess. But then for me, I'm like, all the people that work here and myself, it's a lot better because there's not as much stress. We can help people. Like you can come in here and spend an hour instead of 5 minutes because you're not like, it's so hectic in here. So
Yeah.
I think it was a better situation. And yeah, and it, you know, this year has been pretty challenging, but I think again, I'm trying to look at it positively, and I think it's going to be better for the long run for us to have more space. And, you know, I don't know, we'll see what happens maybe in spring, but I'd like to do potentially maybe some little gallery show or something in the shoe room, because I think it's a nice space for that. So
Hmm.
we'll see.
Was it ever hard with the old spot? Like, just like with space, I guess, stocking all the shit you needed to stock? Because you didn't have like, that was your only storage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely was a challenge. And what it usually required was me, I had a small storage unit at South Street Seaport.
Okay.
So a lot of days I would start the day by going down there with two skateboards, one to ride, one to put stuff on. And I'd go down there and bring, whether it was decks, shoes, whatever, to restock, because that was the only place that I had extra stock. Because the other side of it was for like shoes and everything like that. For anyone that would ever had been in there before, I don't know if you remember, but there was just shoes around like up high in the back, but we had a tiny little backspace, but it was all shelved out to store as much as we could, but it definitely wasn't enough. And it probably was maxed out in 2015 or 2016. So then, you know, all those years it was just like a sort of a juggling act. And eventually in 2020, when we got the Brooklyn location, we could store stuff there. But it's still, until we expanded, it became a real juggling act of like where to put stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. So much shit that goes unseen with doing something like this.
Yeah.
That's why I have a lot of respect for it. And not just that, but like in any project where like someone from like you didn't go to school for fucking business, you know what I mean? And to carry this out over this long of a time frame in New York especially is like a daunting task. And not a lot of people are able to do it. And I think it's important too because like we were talking about it before, but like that thing that a skate shop does for people who skateboard and kids who get into it is a huge part of what makes the whole experience like a thing. um and when it's happening maybe you don't realize it, but then afterwards you really cherish those memories and they become like things that you don't forget. Like every single time I got sunned at my local skate shop, I remember it because it like fucking was like heart shattering for me at the time, but then later I'm like, oh yeah, like in a weird way, because really it's just like the older generation sunning you. But I realize now, no, that actually, yes, it was the older generation sunning me, but also like it was character development. And it was also like, okay, like in my brain, don't act this way, or, you know, like mind your fucking P's and Q's and know where you're at and know what you're talking about before you open your mouth and like do homework and like study and research. And it kind of just overall I think made me a better human being. And I think the same for like, and it, you know, it also taught me like respect and awareness of like just situational awareness. It taught me a lot of things. And not just that, but like going into skate shops and like seeing all the actual fucking brands in person when I couldn't see them anywhere else. For my whole life before I skated, I'd go to like fucking Walmart or Target or any shop, Dick's Sporting Goods, and I'm not going to see not one of these brands. Then I get into it, I'm playing this video game, and I'm seeing like all these brands that I haven't seen anywhere in person. Like it's just like a fairy tale. You go to this one place and they're all actually there, like in real time. Like I remember it meant a lot to me to be able to just purchase a Spitfire t-shirt. I'm like, damn, I can wear this shit now. Then all the people who work there too are forever like cemented in my mind, you know what I mean? Like all the like shop characters, and there's just like a whole ecosystem that gets built into it. And labor has that effect, you know, for a lot of kids in New York, which is something that I'm sure is a reason why you wanted to do it in the first place.